say no to that, really. I think that, in the modern lives that so many of us live, the mind is seriously activated, and that becomes a problem when the mind is constantly analyzing and judging, and there's this kind of ongoing sort of like shadow to the experience of life. And I think for me, at times of elevated stress, that probably becomes worse. The intrusive or the thoughts, that the volume is turned up somewhat. And in Chinese medicine, we see the mind as quite like the stomach. The stomach is digesting our food and our drink, and the mind is digesting what we're experiencing. But it's also digesting what we're experiencing, and that process is kind of echoed by the mind. So the more challenging stuff we're going through, the harder it is to digest those experiences, the more the mind is going to chew over it and ruminate on the past or fixate on the future and fantasize about outcomes and best case and worst case.
And why do you think men hold all of that negativity on until it reaches a boiling point? So men that
I mean, you're so right about the boiling point. This is just such a good topic. It's such a great topic, and thank you for raising it. But yeah, I mean, that was very much my experience. Was the first experience with that was as a teenager, really, with kind of exam stress, I guess, and stress at home, parental stuff, and moving house, and then in the culture that I grew up, we were quite hedonistic back in the day. And, so our expression of freedom and moving beyond was drink and consuming things hedonistically and that kind of scene. And that all came to a boiling point, as you say. And suddenly, the volume is really turned up. And what was a smoother experience of life has now become, heavy as a heavy mind. And that can be a real burden. And I also feel our culture is quite lacking in ways of dealing with that, because we can improve that. Definitely we can lighten our minds, and the mind can be the servant, not the master, which is what I believe it's designed to be. We don't want running the show.
Sometimes, they say the idle mind is the devil's workshop, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes, when you don't have enough to do in your life, the devil can kick in and tell you certain things. Do this to yourself, do that to yourself. I don't know if you ever had those experiences where, your mind is telling you to do something that you would never do to yourself, right? And that's something that men need to hear today. They need to hear that, it's normal. I mean, it might not be normal in a sense to hear voices in your mind, or, get help if you do hear that, get on some medications and stuff like that. But in a sense, sometimes our mind plays tricks on us and say to do harmful things to people that we never really, vent or talk to other people out loud. And I want to touch on that because that's so important, because that's mental health related. And a lot of times men, they just ignore those thoughts, right? They push it to the side, but sometimes that can be a cry for help, because what's really happening is it's really escalating. It might say, push that person off the cliff, or do something wrong to set somebody's up. So like we have demons and spirits walking around us that we don't even know. And they are using us as a vessel to get to the things that they want that's destructive. And I'm not trying to get too religious or, spiritual, but sometimes I think that that's really important to to talk about. Like, have you had any friends that maybe, have that came to you that maybe has said, I'm not feeling good mentally.
Yeah.
My mind is telling me things that I'm just
Yeah.
haven't never been, taught to do or don't
Yeah.
want to do it. Like, have you
Yeah.
ever had those
Yeah.
experiences yourself or?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the other area this shows up in is sort of sexually related things as well. So my recent experience of this is I'm a father of three, and you can be walking over a bridge or down the stairs, and you can have the thought, what if I drop the baby? Or what if I like throw the baby down down the stairs? Or I've had it at times with, like your wallet or your keys or your phone. What if I just throw it in the river? So there's part of this, which is, I know that's not the aspect you're speaking to, but I'll come on to more of what you were getting at. But that experience for me is like, okay, there's something very precious in your life, and it's your mind going, well, what would happen if it's wanting to protect you from the fear of it, from the anticipation of something bad happening to it. So the mind goes, well, let's just get it on now and let's see. And but yes, regarding self-harm and other thoughts which are telling people to do things that they themselves wouldn't do, this is also very common. The important thing is that we recognize there's the thought and then there's us. We're actually the witness of the thought. We're the thinker. So as you say, you don't have to act on it. Yes, it's there. The acting on it is when there really becomes an issue. The thought is just a thought, it's just like a leaf on a river swimming past you. So as long as you yourself don't connect to that leaf or that cloud in the sky, you can separate it out and you can return to the river or the sky, which is your true nature, and recognize these thoughts as whatever metaphor works for you, but something that's transient. I had a supervisor when I was starting out, and he shared with me about a client who was having inappropriate sexual thoughts. And he said, does this make me
Undressing the woman in our mind, or
yeah, exactly. And there are some pretty sensitive boundaries here with kind of, age and stuff. And it's like, does this make me something I should be really worried about? And my supervisor said, have you done anything about it? And he said, no. He said, well, then don't worry. Just don't, the thought, one perspective on thoughts is it is the nervous system de-stressing itself. We can look at it in that way, and we can, as you say, there is a lot of energy flying around. And in Chinese medicine, we talk about ghosts, and we talk about energies kind of hitching a ride with you because they are wanting to go from one place to another, to a lighter place, and you're a vehicle for that stuckness to release itself. But again, that's not personal. You can, you don't take this into yourself. You having that ability to feel think the thought, but to separate yourself out from that. And the same goes with my same supervisor said to me, he said, you never want to drive with an angry person. It's like, this is a cliche because they're going to get angry. Someone's going to do something wrong and they're going to get angry. But it's the same sort of thing, we can have really strong emotions. But as long as we are separate from the emotion, and you don't become the anger, someone cuts you up in traffic or steps on your foot in the train, as long as you're not, acting on that, whatever that may be, and you can feel it and witness it, then that's the important thing. That's the work that I often am doing with men is creating that little bit of space between the thought, whatever it is, however worrying it is, or however dark, or or that feeling. And
But now I want to get into this. Is going to be really dark, Sam. So just bear with
all right, Daron. I'm with you, mate. I'm with you.
bear with me, bear with me. But what happens when we can't control, our emotions or our thoughts, and we act on them, right? Like if we really hate that person, we have a sinister plan in our mind. We want to just throw them on the balcony. Something,
Yeah.
this is dark, but it's like these are the thoughts that sometimes people have that people don't discuss. And I think it's really important for men to understand that this is stuff that it's really normal. I mean, it's not normal to think this, but it's normal in a sense that we have these thoughts, right? Or
we have these thoughts,
or we have these, feelings that, we don't like that person. So we wishing really bad on them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so sometimes our thoughts can lead to actions, which is not what we want. But what do we do once we acted on it? Like we, really slap a person and we thinking it in our mind, but then somehow it becomes reality. You know what I mean? What do we do then in that situation? I guess it's too late at that moment, right?
Well, it's a big question, isn't it? What do we do? I mean, we've got two choices, haven't we? We can either blame ourselves and go all guilty on ourselves and regretful, or we've got, I guess, always the ability to, as you say, take accountability for what we did and apologize. But I mean, I like the metaphor of the golfer who takes his backswing and he makes connection with the ball and he slices it, and it's not the shot he wanted and it's gone, in the lake or something. What does he do next? What he does next is he just comes back to the next shot. You let go of that. All right, I fucked up. I fucked up. I pushed somebody, off the balcony or whatever. Worse, I headbutted them on the tube. It's like, okay, I did that. I did that. I take full responsibility for that. But what do I do now?
Yeah.
What am I going to do with this next shot? Am I going to kick him again? Or no, maybe I'm going to take a breath.
Yeah. And sometimes, and that's well and all, but sometimes it's like, at that point, once you already done that, like, I mean, you can say you're sorry all you want to, but that's assault.
But also, exactly. No, exactly.
And you're going to jail,
Oh, then there's
press charges, So it's nothing it's really whatever happens next, is out of your control at that point because you already acted on that horrible thought.
Which, Matt, as you say, so this is such an important conversation because it's so easy to act on those thoughts and those feelings. It's so easy, and what is not easy is creating that space between us where we can feel that rage, that fire that's consuming us, and we, want, and it's, but we can have some degree of control over how we use it. That is the work, man. That is the work that is what so many men are doing. It's what the kind of like, Chinese culture, that some of those more ancient cultures have been, doing this for thousands of years, and it is work. It is work. And if you ain't doing the work, then you're going to be more vulnerable to acting impulsively and acting from a place that is not becoming of you. Like that is not who you are. Yes, we can all get into those places, and from those places that's appropriate, that we're acting on how we're feeling, but that's temporary. That's not, if you can be with that, that will change. Give it 20 seconds, give it 20 minutes. It's going to change a little bit. It's going to soften. It's going to just not be so tight and so, so potent as,
Well,
So
I want to like, switch the conversation into solutions into some of these thoughts that we might be having.
right,
Sometimes, we have, whether it's intrusive thoughts or we have, thoughts of harming ourselves or thoughts of harming other people. I'm sure it's really relatable. I think I only met one guy in my entire life. Now, I don't know if this is the truth or not, but he said that he never had any thoughts of suicide or anything like that. And I'm
mm,
thinking, like, kudos to you because that ain't the norm from the people that I've talked to. I'm thinking you must have had a really good life to not have anything ever happen to you because I don't know if that ever is that the truth, but that's what he told me. He said he never had any suicidal thoughts. So,
mm,
that's kudos to him. But I'm thinking to myself, like, I don't know how that's possible living this hard life sometimes, but we'll keep it at that. But I think that sometimes, a lot of men don't share the things that's going on in their mind. And so that's what can act or lead to certain things to happen to in their life.
yeah,
I was talking to this friend of mine, and he was saying how he was always so stressed out from work, or he was always so stressed out from relationships, and he always have to be the one to carry everything. Even his boss depend on him. His wife depend on him. Kids depend on him. Like everybody's depending on him, and that he just had a mental breakdown one day, and he smacked his wife.
yeah,
He said, "Leave me alone." You know what I mean? And
mm,
he just went off it. And the wife was she didn't understand what was going on because she was so used to getting her way. Everything was
mm,
always he put himself last before he put her.
mm,
And you never want to be in a place to do that because those
mm,
can lead to a mental breakdown, right?
yeah,
I don't know if you ever had a mental breakdown in your life, but
mm,
those are not good. That means
yeah,
you just snapped. Like you just lost control of reality. And you
mm,
never want to be in that space. That's why I always say it's always good to go to therapy. Good to have friends that you can talk to about certain things in your life before it leads to, and that before it leads to a mental breakdown. Because you never want a mental breakdown in your life. Um, have you ever had a mental breakdown? Or you just feel like you couldn't take it no more and you just snapped on people? Maybe
yeah,
not
no.
to the extent of my friend, but just maybe in your mind, you can have mental breakdowns in your mind too. A lot of people
Yeah,
don't know
yeah,
that.
yeah. I mean, they can be very. I mean, they can not be obvious. They can be silent things. So I guess the first experience I had was a breakdown period where at the crux of it was suicidal thoughts, and I just couldn't see a way forward. I just felt so hopeless. Like there was nothing I could do to change the dynamics, the situation I was in. It was internal and external. It was like my life. It was also, everything inside just felt so drained and so low. And the only out I could think of, was physically ending it. But I kind of realized, well, no, actually, in that moment, I realized, okay, this is a turning point. This is a turning point, and I will end it, or I will solve it. I will find, I will, I will find a container to this misery, and and so that kind of really led me on a spiritual journey of self-discovery. Really, that led me to mindfulness, and then meditation, and then qigong, and I was able to build a kind of, it's like a well. I'd been down to the bottom of the well, and once I'd built some walls around the well, I was able to kind of rise back up and hold that depth of feeling, and it also had a depth upwards as well. So it was definitely an experience I now wouldn't change, but these are not places you want to go. But this, and in this time, what I realized was that we can kid ourselves that that we can push things away, we can suppress, we can deny, we can push away, but the shadow, the stuff that we don't accept and the stuff we don't look at, is more powerful when we don't share it, when we don't acknowledge it and speak it to someone else. So as you say, sharing is so important. Having that conviction in yourself that there's nowhere in my mind that is off limits. Like, I am open to whatever is in my consciousness. That was what I realized. I had to get to that point. I couldn't have things, whether they were traumas from the early years of my life, or things growing up that I was ashamed of, or whatever. I just couldn't leave them down in the depths, because they're more active down there. So as you say, yeah, sharing, a problem share is a problem halved. And this load, you gave this beautiful image of men often feeling they're having to carry the load, and there's only so much we can all take and remain upright, remain with our chests up and our shoulders up until we're gonna bend in some way or break in some way. Mm-hmm. And so I feel we all need to understand for ourselves, what is that support that I need? How do I share that load?
Yeah. And then in the last few minutes that we have here, I just wanted to, break down, like, what is it that makes a person snap, at the end of the day? Like, obviously it's a lot of stressors that can come into somebody's life, but when you throw childhood trauma into it, or unresolved trauma, and a lot of people don't understand that adults can have trauma too. Like, it's not always from childhood. Like, you can experience something from work, or, experience a life-threatening event that happened into you in a public setting, and that could be traumatic too, right? Like, and adults carry that too, but we have to kind of like keep going. Like, we can't stop and go to a therapist all the time.
No.
Our life has to keep carrying on, right? Like, we can go to therapy, but it can't be every day, right? Especially if you don't have insurance and stuff like that. So what makes a person get to a point where they just, like, it just feels like they're a different person? Like, what are some of the factors that can drive that?
So they say that stress is a subjective experience of pressure. So pressure is inevitable in life. There is pressure in our culture to have a certain standard of living, to have success pressure, and very real pressures. There are very real pressures to life. Stress is a subjective experience of that inevitable pressure, and what makes pressure stress and not just pressure is the resources that we have. So how resourced up are we? And by resources, I mean, how well are we sleeping? How good is our nutrition? Like, how good is your close relationships? How have you got a kind of men's group that you can dip into once a month? Do you have like your fitness stuff worked out a little bit, so that you can have some emotional release in that way? And have you got something else going on, like meditation or breath work, or something that's going to actually help your nervous system to process all of this stuff that we experience in modern life? But the question of, well, and what causes the snap, and whatever that snap looks like, that's when the pressure exceeds the resources, and it just goes.
That part.
And then we will either, then it depends, that can then be the kind of, I mean, there was a family in our community in East London, and the husband burnt the house down. He
Oh,
could, it was a very,
mm,
it was as bad as it gets,
mm.
and the community was stunned. We were stunned that this could happen.
Was he always
But
happy, or he had a good life?
he had a good life. He had a good life. It was
Mm,
a happy family. The kids were doing good. I mean, there was obviously some problems. But yeah, this was a relatively sudden, out of the blue event, and so as you say, it's not always that. Yeah, for him, he didn't necessarily have a breakdown. It looked like he was functioning. He must have had some snap point. He must have reached,
mm,
um, but it didn't look. It didn't look to the outside world like a regular breakdown. But
mm.
yeah,
All
so
right.
so when the snap happens, it can go. It can look in various ways.
All right. Well, it's been nice talking to you, Sam. I'm not going to
You
hold you
too,
up any
Darren.
longer. And I do appreciate if you have any final words, or if you are, if you know any men's mental health groups or something like that, now would be the time to kind of say that. If you have any,
Mm,
ways to kind of have men that have support outside of their family, do you have
mm.
any suggestions or words of wisdom for men that's kind of struggling right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say journaling. I would say if you just find time in the morning or in the evening, just write down what's going on in your mind, what's going on in your body, what you're feeling, and externalize it from you. So then that's a really great thing. And I would say if you can find a men's group or a fire circle or something like that, we hold one we meet once a month. They're really good spaces where sharing is invited, and to to be brave enough to talk about this stuff. And when you speak truthfully, it is amazing, how people receive that.
All right. Well, I do thank you, Sam, for being on here and being vulnerable. If you ever do want to come back on and be my co-host, you're more than welcome to. Just let me know a date and a time, and we can work it out. But other than that, I'll let you go and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you for having me on, and